we want to jump over to our next section today, where we're talking. I don't know if Jasmine came up with anything for this, but I left you. Okay,
It's fast on the trigger for that one.
yeah, I left you all with a question, a couple of questions in regard to what was going on with the relationship, as it were, that has been developed between parents in the state and or authorities or local authorities, and the responsibility for our children's development and education. And the reason why that's an important topic is because we are now having some issues where the not necessarily the state per se, but they give into this. But there has been developed, for example, through national organizations like the teachers union, the national teachers unions, where we have one or two people at the head of these unions that are making decisions about how your children are going to be taught according to what they want to teach. And so we get into, for example, teaching, teaching that the family unit is changed now, and the family is not really a mommy and daddy, a gender of a male and a female and a mommy and daddy. The family can be made up of whatever. We have the teaching of critical race theory, where basically they're the proponent that that either you're a victim or you're a victimizer.
Sure.
So if you're of a particular race, you're a victim. If you're of another race, so white versus other persons of color, you're a victimizer. And so we have these types of social theories which have worked their way into the school systems, and there are many parents that are simply saying, we're not going to put up with this. And
there's a mass exodus happening.
There is a mass exodus, but the state now is fighting back and doing things like putting parents in prison because they voiced a view in opposition of what was going on.
I could be wrong, but I think in Germany they're not allowed to homeschool.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me. England also has some very interesting views on this issue as well. Canada.
It is illegal in Germany. Just looked it up.
Canada is becoming more and more, particularly under the leadership of Trudeau, stepping on the rights of Christian parents.
It was only finally allowed in every state in 1993.
Yeah, homeschooling.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was that movement was only allowed in 1993. That's almost like how long it took the Roman Catholic Church to state that the Earth was not the center of the universe.
Yes, indeed. So the question is, for some of you, this may not be a important question, but if you grew up, as I did, if you grew up and I didn't grow up with Christian parents, so I was a product of the school system. I went through the regular school system, and we won't go into
I did grow up with Christian parents, but I also was a product of the regular school system.
Actually, you were a product of a hybrid.
I'm just joking. Yes, by middle school, I was allowed to choose.
Yeah, you were a product of a hybrid.
But I did go to public school like most of my life.
You did go to public school for a large portion of it, but the difference is that your mother and I were heavily involved.
Yes.
In that process, and we would have debriefing sessions and talk about what was going on.
I was just poking the bear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you got a response. But what I started to say was that if you're poor, if you're a common person, and you couldn't afford to send your children away or send them to specialized schools, then you let your kids go to public school. and there was no thought, as it were, in regard to private schooling, because the educational system, that's where you were sent away to learn.
It was convenient.
Yeah.
That's the long and short of it, is with the movement away from trades and into the Industrial Revolution, what were kids to do? They were too young to work in industry. They didn't, all the people that would teach them skills. Well, people tried that, but that got changed.
Yeah.
But they were too young to work in industry effectively, and then they were there was nobody there to teach them in the rural communities, because those people were all in the inner city now. And so what happened? They need a place to go. That's also incidentally why by the 1950s they had that new category of teenager that never existed in the course of humankind.
Yeah. So from a sociological standpoint, what Josh is referring to is society has gone through changes, and we went from an agricultural society to an industrial society, and then after World War II, we began to move into a consumer-based society. And we are probably fully now out of even the industrial part of it and into a consumer-based society. And so, again, the issue being, though, that the education of children has been turned over to the state in order for that education to take place.
Right.
And that education is not, so what is supposed is that the basic education, for example, if you homeschool your child, the only thing that, well, here are some little-known homeschool facts. It doesn't matter up until you reach high school as to how you test.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that what they're looking for is on the testing that takes place, as far as the state is concerned, grade school and all that type of stuff, it doesn't really matter. The cutoff point is when you hit high school. And when you hit high school, those are the things that matter as far as the state is concerned.
Well, the state wants you to test.
They want you to test.
You are required to, so we have it's not a homeschooling co-op, but here at the church we have a education advocacy program that helps parents who homeschool and parents who have their kids going through mainstream public school as well. But there is a requirement for you to do state testing. I think it's every 2 years.
But what are they testing?
Well, hold on. Starting at, I think, maybe third grade. I can't remember. I'm not in charge of it. That being said, or at least I don't run the daily aspect of it. That being said, you don't actually have to turn in your test scores.
Yeah.
Unless they ask for them.
What really is important is once you hit high school age, then things change as far as the state is concerned. And really, they're only testing for two things.
It's not
math capability.
It's more than that.
Well, but
it's
at least from the days that your mother and I were involved, very limited.
It's limited. It is reading comprehension and math. But that being said, honestly, like, that's the same thing in high school too. Like, if you take your GED, you don't actually need all the things that they test for. Because
right.
GED is state testing too.
Right.
You don't need all the superfluous stuff that you get in high school either. If you go through the mainstream high school program, they're going to push you through and like kind of force or at least shame you if you don't, continue to take math every year, even though you're only required to take, I think, 2 years.
2 years, right.
It's like that. Maybe 3 now. I'm not sure. I know it's changed a little bit. But
when I was in school, it was 2 years. They may have changed some things around, but yeah, the history and social science and all of those weren't necessarily true. Now, of course, the school that I went to, Benson Polytechnic, they required lots of extra stuff that if you did, but the thing that they held over you was that if you didn't pass certain things, like if you didn't pass biology, you were out.
Well, that went out the door with No Child Left Behind for public schools.
Yeah, which is many, many years later.
Along with Benson, I want to add. I think I drove by it the other day and it's like doesn't exist. But yeah.
Yeah. So the responsibility of parents basically uh, whether intended to or not, basically was left to the state by and large. And it's only the last couple of years that you, as Josh said, that you have states that finally allow for some homeschooling and or certain charter schools.
Yeah, well, and there's a bunch going on though with COVID. Like COVID has really
Well, that's what's opened some people's eyes to what's going on.
altered some people's perception about, yeah. There's, on the one hand, there's parents who are saying, on this far, on the far hand, there's parents who are saying like, whoa, teachers do an amazing job, I cannot do this. On the other hand, there's people on the other far side who are saying, really, why am I sending my child away? And my life and their life is much better by me having to have interactions with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, the discussion's definitely grown quite a bit.
So what we're going to do is next week we're going to continue this discussion. We're going to talk more about, at least we're going to talk about what is a hybrid. I talked about the fact that as we became as my wife and I became more aware of our involvement in our children's education and the importance of being on top of things. How did we develop a hybrid? And then, of course, we have the program here, as Pastor Josh has alluded to, here to provide parents with help for their children that are in the normal school thing.
Yeah, let me just say as a shout out to people who listen to this in perpetuity or, separately, even if you're not a part of our church, you can reach out to our church. We have a great deacon. Her name's Heidi, and she's in charge of all of our external ministry type stuff, and she can talk to you about that program.
Yeah,
we built it in a way where we wanted people to be able to build that within their own church communities. And one of the things that did happen with COVID is we had churches reaching out to us saying like, we need to start something similar to this. How do we do that? So if you are somebody who's listening to this in perpetuity, reach out to our church, abfpdx.org. You can email Heidi at connect@abfpdx.org, and she can give you information on this program. It's called the Cadre Program.
Yeah, excellent. So next week we'll talk more in detail about the Cadre Program. We'll talk more in detail about what if you don't want to do that type of a program, but from a biblical perspective, how involved should we be in our children's education, and how can we help them? And so we'll continue that discussion next week.